I spent 13 years in management development courses through Mirage Resorts, and it wasn't until I left that I realized 13 and a half years of management does not make a leader.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Boxx. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Boxx.
Welcome, I'm Sarah Boxx, and you are listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast, where we share stories of transformation and possibility. Today, I am joined by the radiant and wise Julie Wignall. She is an author, coach, speaker, and visionary behind The Extraordinary Power of Fireflies. Just think about the title of that, and just the visualness of that title just grabs me. But Julie's journey weaves through the landscape of corporate leadership, international conservation, and esoteric philosophy. So if that's not a blend, I don't know what is. And she's someone who sees beyond what is to what can be. You know, she talks about fireflies, and it's actually a metaphor that invites each of us to explore our unique light and how we can use it to spark change in the world. And if you know anything about me, that's something I'm always learning about and interested in. So whether you are navigating a pivot or seeking to reconnect with your own purpose, I know today's episode with Julie will leave you inspired to shine brighter and take bolder action and create lasting impact. And that's what I'm trying to do in my own life. So with that, let me formally welcome Julie to our No Labels, No Limits podcast. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm really glad we could connect despite our little bit of technical stuff in the beginning. But I want to start with the concept of fireflies. So what inspired you to use that image to describe changemakers? And then how did that shape your own work and writing?
Well, to explain to you that we're always still learning, and I'm amongst those that are always still learning. Imagine this. I started with this concept for a book where I wanted to show everything's connected. Social justice is connected to environment, which is connected to economics, which is connected to the arts. We need all these things intertwined. And you start checking this out by talking to people. And I would say, oh, yeah, and you're working on a book, and what is that? And you go try to explain this. And this also has to do with climate change and this and that. And you start seeing a glazed look coming back to you. And it's like, I'm not reaching my intended audience. And that was for me to step back and say, what is it? What is my mission? And, sometimes I tell people we write what we need to know and what we need to remember. I work with a group of authors who are always saying when someone hits a glitch, go back and read your own book. You already wrote about this. But what was the message that I wanted to get across to people? And I want people to know that we each have the power. We each have that light to shine brighter. And coming with a background in environmental science, fireflies I chose because everyone, when I mention fireflies, lightens up a little bit. They get a sparkle in their eye. And just the concept, whether you've seen them or you haven't, or you've seen them in a movie or in a book, they delight. They take us back to a childhood where we remember that everything is magical and that we are limitless in what we can do. And I believe that we need to take that energy to bring it today to say we need to make lots of changes. We have a lot of work to do to get done, but we need to do it with knowing that we have that magic. We have that power to make those changes that we want to do. And then presenting this with fireflies, there are a lot of things that people don't realize about fireflies, which the more I went into it, I said, yes, there are people that are fireflies. Not all fireflies shine, but we all have the capacity to. There are over 2,000 species of fireflies found all over the world. So they're everywhere, and they glow in multiple colors. So this is a family that encompasses and embraces a huge amount of diversity. And fireflies, I think of this in terms of us as people and what we foresee as our own limitations of what we can and can't do. Fireflies don't ask anyone for permission to shine. They just do it. And it's like they got some good messages that I think that we need to bring along with us.
So let me ask for a definition from you, because you talk about changemakers and you use fireflies to describe changemakers. Can you define how you use that word changemaker?
Absolutely. I define a firefly of the human variety as anyone who sees beyond the reality of what is to what can be, what should be, and then they take action to create a better reality to help transform the world for the better. And each one has a unique impact on the planet, on each other, on our lives, on our community, because we all do it in different ways.
Okay. So what I'm thinking about someone listening to you saying, well, I'm just regular old Sarah, I'm not a change maker. It sounds like you're challenging that.
Well, because actually you are a change maker. You know, there are people who are changing the world on an international basis. There are people who are changing the world in their community, in their state. There are people who are just caretakers, and those people are changing the world for the people that they're caring for. And if we're doing it with a conscious awareness and a set of a code of values, then we're having a huge impact on the world. When we are caretakers of ourselves and we make sure that we're happy, the world needs more people who are happy. So that's changing the world.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you made, because it's really easy for us to discount ourselves or say, well, I'm not on as big a quote unquote platform as so-and-so. How can I have impact or be a change maker? But you're right. It comes down to even something as small as looking at someone in the eyes and smiling at them.
Yeah.
When you encounter them, because you have no idea what happened in the 5 seconds before you came across them.
That's absolutely right. And, you know, there are times I've worked with clients that I'll say, okay, how do you want to treat other people? What are your code of values? And they'll list, oh, I want to be kind, and I, you know, want to have, give them space and be compassionate and empathetic. And I'll have them write everything down, and I'll say, now go back and read it all to you. Are you acting that way for yourself? Are you being kind to yourself? Are you being compassionate? Some days we get up in the morning and we're ready to climb mountains, and other days we have to pat ourselves on the back and just be happy that we made it through the day and we smiled once or twice. And we need to, you know, we talk about being kind to other people, and that begins with being kind to ourselves.
Yep. You know, you're absolutely correct with that, Julie, because it's hard to fake kindness if you can't feel it. It's exactly. Not, and if you won't accept it from others, then it's hard to give what you haven't received, right, from yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that you say that. I have a free download on my website called Flying Lessons for Fireflies. And one of the exercises I put in there, which everybody gets to know once they've talked to me for a while, is I call it the grocery store exercise. How do you maneuver through a grocery store? There's a lot of stuff that's out there between businesses and corporations where you have the heads of these, whether it's from Oprah Winfrey to Barack Obama, people who are big leaders there that say, oh, and I used my intuition a lot. And it's like, oh, that's the catchphrase today, is your intuition. And before that, it was my psychic abilities. And before that, it was my ESP. And I said, let's talk about intuition and let's break it down, because what it really is, we're talking about keeping the information that we already have, that we're getting from books, from other people, but it's also our awareness of ourselves and our awareness of the people around us. And I do simple grocery exercise. How are you when you go through the grocery store? How do you respond to people? How aware are you? Would you be aware enough to know that there's a woman down at the end of the aisle that needs help getting something from a top shelf? Do you know what's on sale or what's not on sale? Or are you just putting your blinders on to go, I'm here for the lettuce and that's it? And how do you respond?
You've been looking at my list.
And how do you respond when somebody leaves their cart in the middle of a grocery store aisle? Do you push it away? Do you do one of those, excuse me, you're blocking everything? Or do you find another way to go around? And I've done this with so many people that if I'm in the grocery store with someone I know, and there are times with my daughter where we'll just go around and she'll go, that person is not a firefly. But it's really, it's awareness. It's increasing our awareness, and it's our ability to pay attention to what's going on. First, we start with what's going on within ourselves, and then what's going on in the world around us.
How do we differentiate? So I'm thinking about an actual experience. So I know for me, I could go through the let's use the grocery store again as an example. I can go there and I can go back 20 minutes later and be a totally different person going through that grocery store. Because,
we can all do that. Absolutely. We are changing constantly, which brings up the importance of checking in with ourselves. Where are we?
Yeah. I think that's powerful, because when I started doing that, like all of a sudden stuff that used to bug me, I'm thinking, okay, what's really going on here? You're tired. Well, don't take it out on other people. You need a nap, or I'm frustrated.
Right.
Those kind of things are the easy ones for us to like go get snippy or like say snarky with other people when it's not indicated. Nothing anybody else has done, right?
We live in a culture and a society where we're not taught to check in with ourselves or to say, are we okay? What's going on? I use this a lot as an example. I was working with a colleague and they were getting so snarky, and I finally stopped and I said, wait a minute, what's going on? And they looked at me and they said, I have a headache. I didn't realize I have a rip headache. And I'm sitting there thinking, how could you not know that? Well, because we say we have these tasks to do and we just have to follow them without checking in. And we don't always stop to go, we haven't checked in with ourselves, and how are we treating others because of it? Or I'll have the people go, oh, I do my secret to success is I do mindful meditation every day to keep myself centered and aligned. And then you get in a car with them and you listen to them scream at every other driver. It's like, but that mindful meditation isn't exactly working unless we're incorporating this throughout the day with all the people that we're encountering.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful observation, because a firefly is going to act one way, behave in one way, right? Versus someone who's just reactionary.
Right.
Yeah. What you just said, though, about all the different colors of fireflies and the different species, and I'm just still stuck on that. It's so amazing to me. I didn't know that.
It is incredible. And I'll tell you, I decided when I wrote the book, because I've had a very unconventional background and it's gone back and forth through a lot of different careers, from nonprofits to international business to Fortune 500. And I've learned things from all of them, and that becomes that consilience, putting all of that information together. But I thought, I want to share lessons that I've learned, but I want to show how other people have put it to use. I get kind of tired where they're the books that are out there that go, this is the only way to diet. You have to follow my diet or nothing is going to work. This is the only way. I want you to make $1 million. This is the only way to do it my way or not. And my belief is that there are many different paths that lead to the top of the mountain. And I want people to question my path as well as everybody else's, because you got to find the path that works for you. So, which is why I've got 20 different examples of people from around the world who are each in different fields and have each done it completely differently. And to say, find your own path. With more than 40 years of experience of studying Jungian psychology, Carl Jung once said, if the path before you is clear, you're probably on somebody else's. So it's like, part of this isn't to say, I can see where this is going, because life kind of takes winding roads, but to see it's okay that, we got to kind of get in the groove of feeling that it's okay not to know what.
A little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. Or a lot uncomfortable.
Well, we are. And, I just spoke with he was an inspiring gentleman this morning. We were talking about a separate issue and his nonprofit, but he is doing something to honor the generations before him, to benefit the generations that follow him. But one of the things he said was that he learned most from his ancestors was that all of the stuff they went through, and they went through some horrendous things, they told him, his grandparents and his parents said, you cannot hate. You have to stay open and extend your heart, basically, is the shorthand for the brilliance that he put across. And I thought, isn't that the truth? That when you can't withstand like the bumps, you get stuck and you quit. And that's what I liked when you were talking about the Jungian thing about, okay, if you can see the path, it's likely not yours.
Right.
It's too easy, right? We have to learn on ourselves and trust that we can go beyond.
Yes. And I love what this gentleman is saying in terms of, what we have to learn from ancestors. I grew up amidst a number of Holocaust survivors. And the biggest lesson was because I was like, how can you not hate? How can you not be so angry? And it was like, but the best revenge is to live the best life that you can and to be happy, which has led me to right now, in the last couple of years, I've kind of done my own pivot shift to say, working with nonprofits and organizations, or any kind of movement, has been to say, let's make it a multi-generational movement. I have gotten really tired of, this is our youth-led movement. This is our senior-led movement. We need more human-led movements, and we need to start listening, active listening to people who are older, people who are our age, people who are younger, and we still need that 10-year-old in the room to remind us to smile and play and have fun to keep us all on track and give us some levity as we move forward.
Wow, isn't that the truth? Okay, but you brought up the topic. I want to circle back a little on this because it's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. You brought up the topic about being unconventional, and looking for new doors as the other ones close. So can you share a time or two when doing that actually reshaped your own path, when you were on a clear path and you did something, you went, oh, not my path, and you had to pivot?
Yes, well, probably, and I do this every day, the pivoting of the past. But the biggest thing that really changed everything, picture this, I was working as the director of programs for the National Aquarium in Washington, D.C., which meant that I was really the director of the aquarium. But at the time, it was very unconventional to put women in positions like this. And there were no other women that were running any aquariums. And although that was my goal, they said, no, never going to happen. Julie Packard had just opened Monterey Bay Aquarium, and everyone was like, oh my God, it's a female. And what she's done has been nothing short of amazing. But here I am at the aquarium, and I'm also working with the Smithsonian and the National Zoo. And this sounds really impressive when I talk about it in the past, but in the past, I was doing all three positions because none of them paid the bills. So because, and this is nonprofits, and they tend to be very, very low paid. And I was working with nonprofits in Washington, D.C., some of the biggest people, and people with great ideas, but they were always saying, it's time for the next fundraising campaign, and it's time for the next fundraising campaign. And even my own staff, I had made my way up the ladder just because I was good in terms of biology, not because I had management experience or I knew anything about leadership. And all of a sudden you're at the top. And I had an education staff that would ask me every month, Julie, what's our budget for education programs? And I kid you not, Sarah, we had a wishing well. This is the National Aquarium, Washington, D.C. We had a wishing well in front of the aquarium at the time. And I'd say, all the pennies that are in that wishing well, take them out. They're all yours. And whatever's there, that's your budget for next year. And I got so tired of that. And within the environmental conservation community, you don't discuss big business because they're bad. They're the horrible guys. They're greedy. And I heard this so many times over and over again, but there was a part of me that said business, corporations aren't bad. Corporations aren't greedy. People within these corporations might be greedy. So if there are greedy people in corporations, then there must be people who aren't. And if they're there, they're making money, and I need to know how they're doing it because we got too many organizations that have a lot to do and are spending way, way too much time looking for funding. And I got my opportunity when I got a call out of the blue from an architect in Las Vegas. Now, I am on the track becoming one of these great marine biologists and just environmental conservationists in Washington, D.C. There's my path, got a great future ahead of me. And here comes an architect from Washington, D.C., from Las Vegas, Nevada, who was working with Steve Wynn, millionaire who's got this vision at the time, completely transforming Las Vegas. And he called and he said, I want to know about putting dolphins behind a hotel in Las Vegas. Now, picture this, the academic in Washington, D.C. going, oh my gosh, please don't do this. I have these visions of a substandard motel. They're going to want to teach the dolphins how to pull slot machines in the back. Please, please, you forget this. Don't do this. And he said to me, I'm not asking you, should we do this? I'm asking you, can we do this? And it was the question that changed everything. And it's like, you know what? You can do this. There's certain laws that you can follow, and you have to do this in order to do that. But this is a different question, and yes, you can. And at the time, Sarah had no idea anything about Las Vegas. I thought it was just all run by drug cartels that paid you in drugs if you worked here.
Oh my God.
And they started calling me the next day and said, this Steve Wynn wants to talk to you. We just need you here for 24 hours. And I'm flipping out. I'm telling my staff, oh my God, what if they offer me a job? And what if I say no? And they're going to find my body at the bottom of Lake Mead with cement blocks tied around me.
Dramatic at all, Julie?
Just a little bit, right? And then, well, because picture, I come in and they call this the gaming industry. I come from a background where when we're talking about gaming, we're talking about wildlife and we're talking about hunting licenses and fishing licenses. And they're talking about gaming and I'm hearing all these sounds from slot machines going on. But I came and I sat down with Steve Wynn and he said to me, he said, I want to build one of the world's best habitats for animals. What would that be? And I was so terrified because I'd heard so many horrible things about big businessmen that I gave him a list basically of demands. It has to be 3 times that if we're going to do a pool, it has to be 3 times the size of government standards. It can't be a blank pool. We need interesting things on the inside for nurturing of the animals. Oh, and I can't take any animals from the wild. This would be only animals that are already in captive situations that can't be released from the wild. So we become kind of just like a home for animals to live happily out their lives. Oh, and we have the 8th largest school district here. So we need education programs and they have to be for free. Oh, and by the way, I don't want students walking and traipsing through your casino and hotel. I need a special private entrance and they need the facility all to themselves until 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going down this list. And he looked at me and said, okay, so what's the problem? When are you ready to start? And he turned out to honestly be one of the biggest animal rights activists that I've ever worked with, supported everything that I could do. And I ended up not only taking care of all the aquatic animals and the dolphin habitat, we had aquariums and aquariums and other facilities, but then I also got to take over the secret garden and help build that of Siegfried and Roy and deal with their animals. But what was amazing about the whole thing, working within a corporation and especially within like a casino, hotel, resort situation, is these casinos and resorts are like mini cities. So I have my part here, but there are all these different departments and I got to have influence and impact working on making sure restaurants were serving sustainable seafood. I got to have impact in saying we were the first hotel and resort on the Las Vegas Strip that did not sell any furs in. I was like, how can you do this if you say that you're there for animals? Water conservation and recycling. I mean, there were so many different initiatives that I was able to do within the corporation. And you get a little bit big and you think, I can kind of change the world. And I was actually at a conference with a bunch of zoo and aquarium professionals where we would meet once a year, and everybody announced it was the International Year of the Coral Reef, and what is everybody going to do? And I listened to all these different zoo and aquarium directors say, oh, we're going to have handouts, and we're going to run a contest, and we're going to come up with money to do a poster. And I actually stood up and kind of had a temper tantrum at the time. And I said, you know what? We need baselines of coral reefs. We need to start looking at what's going on so we can track this in the future and know what's happening. And when you guys all get past dealing with your contests and your posters and your whatever, let me know, because I'm over and out. And I got up and I left the meeting. And I had someone who handed me a card and said, can I have yours? As I walked out, I had no idea who this was. And a week later, I got a phone call from Washington, D.C., within a government entity that I worked with for a number of years. So I just figured this was a mid-level bureaucrat I was dealing with, and was asking me about my comments and what I had to say. And I went on a 45-minute tirade of what we need to be doing for coral reefs. And it turned out that I was talking to an undersecretary of commerce who was getting ready to make a huge presentation to the United Nations, and said, okay, will you work with me and let's see what we can do. This ended up in starting the International Coral Reef Initiative program in terms of tracking this. So you never know, but I felt during the time I was there, it was like, this is kind of neat. I'm ruling the world. But I wanted to know what would happen if you had an environmental conservationist that worked hand in hand with business. And there was a lot that I learned from them. But, you can't just go in and say, we need sustainable seafood here. You got to kind of do the work to say, I would like to see you switch out this fish for this fish. Here's the pricing. Here's the difference in your price points. And this is so that you're doing the work for them to show that you understand the importance of economics.
Well, the beauty of what you were just sharing too is you didn't pit yourself against them. You just said, hey, I get it. And here, let's take this one step together. And it's easy, it's painless. Like you said, you did the homework instead of saying, hey, it's on you, figure it out, and pointing fingers, or implying that they're so stupid they probably don't care about the environment. You don't know that, right?
Right. They were the biggest supporters, Sarah, of anyone. And I constantly tell, when I'm dealing with nonprofits, stop preaching to the choir. I'm here to help the zoo animals. I'm here to help the aquarium animals. And who are you talking to? Everybody who's volunteering or working with ocean conservation. But you know what? The people who are going to the opera, they like zoo animals. The people who are going to the art museums, they like zoo animals. The people who are doing all these other things, I had a huge support system of 5,000 employees where when you bring them in and make them part of the solutions of what you're trying to do, it changes everything. It's like now you've got cheerleaders, and now you've got people at the forefront when someone comes to say, oh, I don't know about this. And they go, oh, but we do. And it was getting in the inside of all the different departments. We had a huge lobby aquarium that, 40,000 gallons of water, absolutely huge. And, these are hotels, they're open 24/7 in it. I kept the aquarium where it would get darker at night, but I'd always get calls, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Julie, we're concerned about the fish. They're not really moving very much. And it's like, but the fish are sleeping. And so was I. So I actually went and spent a lot of time during graveyard shifts with our front desk personnel, with our maintenance personnel, because somebody was always calling maintenance to say, you got to fix something with the fish. And so then I worked with all of them so that they knew and they understood, and empowered them with information so that they became my front lines. When someone came to do something, I made sure everyone knew what to do and how to do it. And it's like, oh no, then they all sounded like junior biology.
but how great you made them part of it. I think how hard would it be if I'm like in this one area, I'm on the desk or I'm maintenance, right? And someone says, you hear a customer or someone staying there say, oh, these fish aren't right. And to be able to turn around and say, no, they're actually good. They're sleeping. This is when they're more dormant. They're sleeping. That's perfect. Come back in the morning.
And how wonderful knowing that people have, and that's back to that consilience. Everybody's got something special, their superpowers or things that they do to add to that. I had education programs where to explain animal adaptations. We used to dress kids up and in outfits like a dolphin or tiger. What are their different adaptations that they had? And, I'm used to teaching with the rubber bands and toothpicks because there was never a budget. And all of a sudden I'm within this corporation and I'm going, there is nothing off the shelf that I can even buy. And I sat down with our uniform control people. These are people who know how to sew. And they looked at me and they said, you are out of your mind. You're using the most ridiculous materials. We could do stuff that's going to help it last longer, be more impressive to the kids. And I was like, you know what? You know how to do this. And I'm listening and I want your help. And as people become part of that, they take pride and ownership in that. And I learned, Sarah, that the same thing comes true in terms of when we're doing fundraising. I had the chance to work very closely with Elaine Wynn, who was a super, super supporter of what we did. But I learned from Elaine that when you have someone who is really investing big bucks into something, they want to be, for the most part of the process. Unless they tell you they want to be hands off, just give me a status report here and there. They want to be part of the process. They're choosing to give money to you, to your organization, because they want to feel that the money that they have is actually making a difference. We have a strange way of looking at money in our culture, but when we understand it as energy that flows in and out and back and forth, they're doing this to say, I have these resources that I want to donate to you to make something happen. And they really don't want your annual report that just says, oh, and we did this and we did this and we did this. They want to know, and they want to become part of the process. They want to know the pitfalls that you're hitting. Where they can say, okay, I have an idea, maybe, okay, great. And they want to be part of that so that when those achievements come and you go, we did this, that they really feel that it's their achievements too, not just the achievements of their money.
Why do you think that doesn't happen more frequently?
I think that we're missing a couple of steps. People either why do people go to work for nonprofits in the first place? It's because we're either passionate about what they're doing. We're working with the homeless. We're working and they want to see a change. That doesn't necessarily mean that they understand the administrative tasks or the management task. Okay, so then we've got people who studied management in terms of nonprofits. I thought I was doing a lot. I spent 13 years in management development courses for Mirage Resorts, and it wasn't until I left that I realized 13 and a half years of management does not make a leader.
You are so correct.
We need more leadership, and people define leadership in very, very different ways, and that's okay. But I think it's important that we know how we personally define leadership. And to this day, I read books constantly, and books to get different people's ideas on leadership. I just did a course in leadership through Yale University just to hear something else. And it's not that sometimes you learn, well, you always learn, but sometimes you hear things and you go, that doesn't quite resonate with me. I see it a little bit differently. And that's a way to really kind of fine tune. This is what we need to move forward. And what does that mean? And part of that in terms of working with big donors and finding different ways to do that also becomes active listening.
Yes,
which
absolutely.
We don't teach and we don't practice, and taking a look at it. And for me, back to that consilience, if I'm looking to make an impact, I'm going to spend a lot of time actually also studying sociology, courses in economics and human behavior to understand why somebody would want to give money to me and how they work. And this has been really interesting. And just this last week, I've had two different instances on two different ends of the spectrum dealing with the nonprofit community. We have a number, I have 3 cats of my own, and we have a number of stray cats in our neighborhood that we help to feed here and there. One of these stray cats is a young female who's really shown that she would like to be an indoor cat and join the rest of us, which we're considering, and we're looking at this, but we also know she has to be spayed and she needs her vaccinations, and I can't mix her with my cats until we go through this. So we've been dealing with all of the animal groups in Las Vegas to say, what's the best way to do this? How can we do this? And then instead of being really helpful, and a lot of times these are volunteers, instead of being helpful or, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, and she's probably already pregnant, and we're not asking this. Well, it's going to cost you $500. And it's like, is there no help here? Or anything that just says, yeah, we support this, you're going to do a good thing. And let's look at all of the options. Now, these are volunteers. And that doesn't necessarily reflect the people who are running any of these organizations. But they don't know when someone like me is dealing with anyone. That's front line. And you immediately, these people on the front lines, volunteers, no matter what they're doing, you're judging the entire organization by somebody's attitude and how they're dealing with you. Now, the same sense, there is a new way of doing business where it's kind of, you focus on, instead of trying to sell people and things, you want to be generous, you want to share, you want to build trust so that people know what you're doing and how you're working. I had an experience this week on because the Nevada State Legislature is in session, and they're trying to do a bill that would prevent book bannings in the area. Okay, so all of a sudden, I'm introduced to a nationwide group of authors against book bannings. Would you be willing to sign a thing? It's like, okay, this is a different group. Now, this is a group that offers their membership completely for free. They get involved in grassroots levels across the United States, and they keep everybody up to date on what's working, what's not working, and how things are happening. Well, that's an organization that's now building up trust. So what did I do? I have a group of probably 50 authors that I work with. I said, you know what? This is free. Everybody needs to sign up for it if you think that this is important. And of course they did. And what happens is that builds up trust. So the day that they turn around, if I watch this and I see that they've got that code of values, which today I think is more important than anything, and they're keeping at it and they build up my trust, the day that they come and they say, now we need funding, I'm ready to sign my name and say, how much do you need?
Well, because you have a relationship, not a transaction, right?
Exactly. And, and in terms of a lot of the nonprofits, it's like, we need to be working on that. You never know when you've got that one person who's been sending you $15 a year that all of a sudden says, no, I want to invest $15,000 in this. You don't know who these people are behind the scenes, but you want to build up trust. And you want to show that you're generous with your information and that you're bringing them along for the ride. And that is building relationships.
I'm just ingesting a little bit of what you said, because I agree with it entirely. And the whole thing about bringing people along, that's so true for when we donate. We've been longtime donors for a number of organizations, and some years we're just in a position to donate more. Right. Exactly. It's not we're not so thoughtful. We plan in the beginning of the year. It's like, okay, let's see where we are financially. But we have a running list. Right. We've never taken off a list. Who else? Do we need to add anybody to the list this year? But I guarantee you, it's the people who've shown us, or we've found more about them, and our trust level has gone up with them. Right.
Yeah.
And that. You're so right on about that. And you can't make assumptions at all, because oftentimes people with the least income proportionately give more.
It's true. And you never know. And I think in terms of organizations, those that are transparent, those that, I say a Firefly, needs to be creating the world that we want to live in. We need to see past what it is. So for me, that means also those organizations really be specific. Give me your ups, give me your downs, let me know. We all have had failures. And it's like, are you failing forward or are you failing bigger? That's the other question. But we all have failures, and those failures are important because they get us where we need to go. And I've seen huge failures on things that I had supported all the way through in terms of some very major organizations. And it was interesting that when I went to write the book, I went to a number of people who I knew who were very big within the nonprofit industry and said, I was part of this. And I know how devastating this was, for you, for everybody else, for things that didn't work. But there were some really important lessons that we learned from that in terms of where we went wrong. Would you be willing to let me document this just in a small piece for the book? And every one of them, even if they had talked to their staff, said, Julie, I can't have you put this in writing. I don't like how it will reflect on the organization, which I respect. But on the other hand, I said, okay, as a Firefly, if I want to create the world I want to live in, I want to create a world where it's okay to fail. I want to create a world where I could say, Sarah, how did this program go? And you go, oh my gosh, it was miserable because I didn't do da-da-da-da. Okay, so I want to learn from that. And I want to be able to say the same thing. So I actually ended up using one of my own big failures in the book to say, that's the world that I want to live in, where you aren't defined by your failures, but where we can share them and go back and forth. And for me, my failure, I created the first public education program for kids who are visually impaired through the National Aquarium to introduce them to aquatic life. And with my background in being in Washington, D.C., I worked with every PhD, Sarah. I worked with the Smithsonian and educators and everybody to come up. For 6 months, I researched this and came up with, just the perfect program to introduce students to aquatic life who are visually impaired. Now, according to the research, 97% of the students that are visually impaired, they told me, will actually have low levels of sight. So we could use things like flashlights to show them the fish in the aquariums. Well, the day came to pilot the project. I had 80 students show up that 97% of them were 100% blind. So we had to throw out all the concepts in terms of flashlights. What could we do for low vision? But we thought, multisensory. So when they come in, they can hear the ocean. Well, the program was a disaster. And it took about 10 minutes before all the props we were using were broken. And the kids were crazy. And I stopped and I had everyone sit down. We had a theater area. And I said, you know what? I made the biggest mistake of all. I went and I created a program and I forgot to find out who my audience is, and that's you guys, and to find out what you would want. And I said, now, would you be willing to partner with us and join us, and you help co-create a program that's going to be meaningful for you, which completely changed the books for everything. But you come to these conclusions. Oh, yes, I'm going to play them ocean sounds because they're going to love this. And the kids all said, we know we're not at the beach. We're in an aquarium. Why are you messing with our heads? It's and getting the feedback from them directly reminded me, and I wrote about this in the book, the importance of being an advocate in terms of learning from the people that you're trying to reach what they really want before you become an activist, which has stayed with me ever since.
Advocate before activist. I love it.
Always. I've been lucky enough to work with a number of the Native American tribes in New Mexico. And one, we were actually adopted. My family was adopted into, and wonderful people, and it was wonderful experiences to work with. But I watched a group come in with them that absolutely fell on their face. Why? Their program was wonderful. What did they forget to do? They forgot to ask what the proper etiquette was in terms of working with Native Americans. And when you work within that culture, the first thing you do before anything is honor your elders. And those are the first people that you talk to say, this is the program that I want to do. Do you have any input on that? And they skipped that step. And just that one simple step became the failure of their program, which was a great program, which was, it was kind of sad, but it's the importance of saying, we need to pay attention. We need to listen more. We need to ask more questions, and we need to understand that we're not the ones that always have the answers. I can be great and give you all of the scientific specifics on fireflies and different species and this and that, but you know what? If I really want to reach you, I need an artist. I need someone in the arts. I need someone who is a great storyteller. That's not dealing with the facts. I need someone who's writing a song, because we learn, and that is the biggest thing in terms, I think, of nonprofits. We're trying to say to people, whatever nonprofit, that we're looking for people who have the same vision as us. But too often we scare them with statistics, or they go, oh my gosh, I still get emails today from groups that say, Julie, without your $10 every day, this animal's going to die. And I went, I've gotten the same email for the last 10 years, but the animal's obviously still here. So maybe we need to change our tactics, and if I had sent you that $10 every week, because then they'll say, Julie, we're ashamed of you. How could you say no? Well, if I had done this, then by now, Sarah, I'm sorry, but that animal should have been saved, or something should have happened. We need to take a different tactic, and we need to stop scaring people. We need to stop bullying them. We need to tell them better stories, and we need to remember that it's not the science that gets people who jump on board. I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and a lot of his leadership talks. And he said, Martin Luther King didn't stand up and give his I have a dream speech and say, I've got a 10-point plan for how we're going to move ahead. He said, I have a dream. And we need to touch people's heart centers, which we touch through that emotional heart center through the arts, to then connect to their brains and then provide the additional information that they need. But we all, I think we need to really tune in, and that's back to paying attention to ourselves. We need to know our superpowers, where they are and where they're not, and how to bring people in to make them part of that group that's going to take us all to the next level.
So with that in mind, as we're wrapping up the podcast, you have a couple of free offers that you will offer our listeners. Will you share what those are?
I sure do. I have on my website, which also has the link to all the social media things. It's just www.extraordinaryfireflies.com. There's a free download of 5 lessons to get you shining brighter right away, called Flying Lessons for Fireflies. That's a free download. When you download that, it puts you on a mailing list that gets you once a week just a small tidbit of advice, encouragement. It's no sales. It's just to say, I think we all need a little bit of advice, a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of inspiration every week just to keep going. So that's there. And for people who want to know what it's like to, I encourage people to work with coaches, with consultants, with groups everywhere. And I think more nonprofits need to understand what that looks like and how it benefits them. When I left corporate America, I said, I've got all this information. I want to share it with all the nonprofits and groups that I've worked with. And they said, no, we already know we don't need that. The ones who kept hiring me were companies. And it's like, guys, you've got to learn from these groups what it takes. So, and today more than ever, there are coaches, there are consultants, or groups around everywhere that will offer you, a free introductory call. It's not a sales pitch. It's just to give you an idea of what it would look like to work with people. And I tell people, working with a coach is like working with a psychologist. You have to find the one that's the right fit for you. And because all of us working in the field understand that, most offer free opportunities to say, let's sit down and talk about it. This is how I work. then go to the next person and find out how they work. No one's pushing anything down your throat. It's to say, let's find out what it is. And maybe you're ready for it now. Maybe you're ready for somebody else, but it'll help give you clarity as to what you are looking for, whether it's today or a year later. I've done calls with people that will come back to me a year and a half later going, you know what? I need your help in blank. And that's fine, because when we all shine and rise, we all rise together and we shine brighter.
Everything's a little bit lighter and a little bit brighter.
Exactly.
Julie, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've had fun learning from you and listening to you and enjoying your energy and passion for what you do. So, and for making me laugh about Las Vegas a little bit, because I live in the northern part of Nevada.
I know.
And when people say, why don't you just come down? Let's have breakfast. I'm going to be in Vegas. I'm thinking, that's an 8-hour drive or an hour and a half flight. So
yeah, I know. But you live in a more civil part of the state. When I talk to people up in northern Nevada, it's like, oh yeah, you guys are like regular.
Well, we're smaller, right? We're growing. We're smaller.
It is a beautiful area, though. I've had the chance to travel all through Nevada, and northern Nevada is just wonderful from one side of the state to the next.
Las Vegas is its own place.
It's strange, and I go, I'm not sure why I'm here, but then I go, well, I feel like the Lorax. Somebody has to be here and fight for this stuff. And it's a good pivoting place to get throughout the Southwest.
It is great. It's great access. You have great people come through there for knowledge and all kinds of reasons. There's a reason for every space, and what I love is that you took assumptions you made about Steve Wynn and what would be possible, and look how your life pivoted and that you met different people. So I love the courage and showing up in your bright firefly light.
Thanks so much. This has been great. And my only final thing, I'm like everybody else. We're all still growing and we can't stop. And the biggest thing I tell people about human fireflies is we don't strive for perfection. We strive for growth.
I can't top that. So I'm going to leave it with you. Okay, listeners, we'll be back next week with another episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. Until then, shine your light, grow a little bit more, and remember to smile.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Boxx. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahboxx.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.